On July 1st, 2026, Sony announced that they were going to stop selling games on discs by 2028. Most people had one of two takes. Either they voiced their horror of a future without physical media, or they implied that piracy is an appropriate countermeasure to this new policy. And both of those takes are awful. So why are all these gamers so upset that Sony won't be serving up their freshest offerings on these aluminum plastic platters anymore? Does Mario jump higher if you bought Super Mario Odyssey from GameStop instead of the eShop? Does the Chosen Undead sword get sharper if you buy Dark Souls from a big box store instead of the Xbox store? Does buying Witcher 3 on PSN make Geralt of Rivia keep his shoes on? No, of course not. These games all play the same whether they came from a box or through an ISP. So why do these gamers care about discs so much? Are they all trying to make their own set of drink coasters out of the Final Fantasy series or something?
They announced that physical discs, the only way for you to kind of own your media, are going away permanently.
You will own nothing! And you will like it!
Yeah, you will own nothing and be happy. Look, we just took down this store revoking your access to these games that you paid for.
No, it sounds like their real problem is that they want to own their games. That is to say, they want to have complete independent control over the thing they bought that can't be taken away by the corporation that sold it to them. So if what they really want is control over the games they bought, then how come they're so upset about discs going away? What does that have to do with it?
I love physical media and I buy it almost exclusively, okay? Almost, there are very few exceptions to that rule. And the reason for that is because I want to own the games regardless of what happens to the digital landscape.
Because of this digital landscape, you don't own anything.
You hear that? The way they talk about this makes it seem like there's this inherent dichotomy between physical media and digital media.
So if you don't have something physical, you literally own nothing. You own the idea of something.
They talk like it's only natural that you can own physical things, but you can't own digital things. And they're completely wrong about that on both fronts. For starters, owning a game's disc hasn't necessarily meant that you own the game itself since we connected consoles to the internet back in the aughts. There are plenty of games that you don't really have the ability to play independently even if you have the disc for it. But more importantly, you absolutely can own digital games because the online store itch.io lets you download DRM-free offline installers for the vast majority of the games in their store. For most of them, you can download the installer onto a flash drive, plug it into a completely separate computer with no internet connection, and play it there without having to connect to the internet ever again. It doesn't matter if itch ever shuts their store down, you'll still be able to play most of the games you bought there because you have as much independent control over the installers as you could ever have over a disc. In fact, you have even more because you can make as many backups as you want on any hard drives you have. If you own a game on a disc and your house burns down, then you lose the game. Game over. But if you have an installer file, you can save it on your computer, a hard drive you keep out in your shed, and another hard drive you keep in your mom's attic. That way, even if your house burns down and your shed gets destroyed by a tornado, you'll still have the copy that you kept at your mom's house. So not only can you really own digital games, but you can own them harder than physical games. This dichotomy is completely false, but Sony... Huh?
Hey, mister. We're here to spread awareness about the public risks posed by the overabundance of beef production on our server.
What? Why does it matter how much beef we're making?
Because producing enough beef to meet the demands of a server as big as ours requires breeding far too many cow entities for the server to safely handle.
But if we all switch to eating low entity count footprint baked potatoes, we could avoid the hazards that come with an overpopulated server.
Well, this server's had an overloaded entity count for years and we're still here talking about it, aren't we? I don't think it's a big deal.
But mister, server analysts are saying that the excessive entity count is responsible for the recent increase in chunk corruption events.
So as I was saying, this dichotomy is completely false, but Sony wants us to buy into it anyway. Because if we accept it, it makes anyone trying to take the side of independent ownership look like an ancient dinosaur who's insisting on holding back popular change because they're too out of touch to get with the times. They'd rather us get stuck in the physical versus digital debate than explain why they won't give us the power to play our downloaded games on offline consoles without asking them for permission over the internet first. And you know how I know they need to sell us on this false dichotomy? Because Microsoft already tried to seize our game ownership back in 2013 without getting rid of physical games first, and the backlash was so strong they had to tap out. They need us to associate total ownership of our purchases with a less popular form of distribution to justify getting rid of it. And that's why all these people doomsaying about all digital marketplaces robbing us of our ownership need to shut up. They're all reinforcing the lie that you can't own digital media. This false dichotomy is the real monster, and everyone who's implying that we need to fight for physical media to preserve our ownership is just feeding it even more. Cut it out! What we should really be fighting for is digital independence! We should be demanding that anyone selling us digital media provide us with just as much control over our purchases as we have over physical media. We should be demanding the freedom to use our digital media whenever and wherever we choose without built-in remote permission withholding mechanisms getting in our way. We should be demanding respect for our self-determination and patronage, because an all-digital future does not have to be a no-ownership future. We should be demanding that Sony give us the same level of control over our purchases that itch gives most of its customers. Now, it might be difficult to imagine Sony doing that because PlayStation games don't have installers like itch games do, but did you know that you can set up something like this for PlayStation games that's almost as good by downloading them to external hard drives? The reason I say almost is because unlike the itch installers, even after you've downloaded them, you can't install them onto another PlayStation without signing into PSN to verify your ownership first. But if Sony wanted to, they could just let us play our downloaded games on other people's PlayStations without signing in. In fact, it would probably take them less work to do it that way. And if they did, then we could put digital PlayStation games up here with the itch games. So we should not be demanding that Sony keep discs around. We should be demanding they give us the ability to play games we download to external hard drives on other offline PlayStations without having to sign in. That is a much easier hill to defend because no one can claim that its defenders are dinosaurs that are too stuck in the past to appreciate the benefits of digital distribution. What we really want is to be able to play our PlayStation library 20 years from now on a used PS5 we found at a garage sale long after the collapse of the petrodollar destroys the internet once and for all. So don't be mad at Sony because they won't let you play disc golf with the winners of the 2029 Game Awards. Be mad at Sony because they won't let you install the digital backup of Knack you keep on your X hard drive to someone else's offline PS4. But Sony can't just let people play their downloaded game libraries without verifying their purchases, because if they made it easy to copy games like that, then nothing would stop someone from buying just one copy of every game on PSN and sharing it with everyone in the world for free. If that happened, Sony wouldn't make enough money to make any more games, so they need to verify our ownership over the internet to stop pirates from sinking the whole ship. Okay, tell me this. If it's so fluking important for them to protect themselves from pirates to stay in business, then why hasn't Piracy sunk everyone involved with itch.io? That's because itch.io doesn't sell real games. They only sell indie games for theater students that cost less than a cheeseburger to make. If they sold real games with real budgets like Sony does, then they would be sunk by piracy. Well, maybe itch doesn't sell real enough games for you. But you know who does? GOG. That's who. And just like itch, GOG sells DRM-free offline installers for their games. But not just most of them, all of them. And here's what Sony really doesn't want you to know. GOG has always gone out of their way to make piracy as easy as possible on all of their games, and they've still sold some of the best-selling high-budget games of all time. So tell me, if it's so important for companies to protect their games from pirates, then how did The Witcher 3, one of the best-selling, most hotly demanded games of all time, manage to make over a third of its sales on PC with absolutely no protection from piracy? How did Cyberpunk 2077 manage to make over half of its sales on PC with absolutely no protection from piracy? How has GOG managed to stay in business since 2008 selling so many hotly demanded games with absolutely no protection from piracy? How has Steam managed to sell so many of these same hotly demanded games when PC players could just pirate the identical versions on GOG with absolutely no protection from piracy? I'll tell you why. It's because piracy isn't nearly as big of a problem as Sony wants us to think it is. Sony acts like we're all exclusively self-interested skinflints whose only priority is to spend as little as possible with no consideration for long-term sustainability or convenience. They act like every single one of us would put a gang on our shoulder angel and spend hours waiting for a server on the other side of the world to squeeze out a 50-gigabyte file that might infect our system with ransomware just to avoid paying if they gave us the chance. But these numbers don't lie. Piracy is not a real threat to the industry. And Sony doesn't want you to realize that because the real reason they require you to verify your purchase every time you play their games is so they can get you to rebuy all your PS5 games on the PS7 for whatever price they feel like after they shut the PS5 store down. Sony needs you. Oh, what now?
Hi there. Just wanted to make sure you're ready for a chunk corruption event.
What? Why?
Some folks on the net who keep up with the server data said that there might be a really big one today, so I'm making sure everyone has an efficiency diamond pickaxe on them just in case they find themselves trapped in something tougher than stone.
Oh, come on. People cry wolf about mass corruptions every other month, and every single time, the worst thing that happens is the top half of someone's bed turning into a piece of dead brain core.
Yeah, but they're saying it's only a matter of time before there's a really bad one, and for all we know, this could be it. So better be safe than sorry and make sure your inventory's got plenty of food in it just in case you're trapped somewhere for a while. And also make sure it's got some torches too in case you get trapped in the dark.
So like I was saying, Sony needs you to believe that people can't be trusted not to pirate so they can justify putting a leash on their games that you can't take off. And that is why people need to stop knee-jerk piracy posting every time this topic gets brought up. All these people piracy posting to cope with their frustration and helplessness are just making Sony's lie stronger. Those people aren't just piracy posting to cope. Piracy really can give people independent ownership over their games. Yeah, well, it may be possible for piracy to give you real independent ownership over your copy of Godfall, but it's also possible for that pirated copy to contain a virus that turns your profile pic into yaoi every time your dad logs into PSN. And even if you found a trustworthy captain out there on the digital sea, you wouldn't be able to tell anybody about their operation without revealing them to the authorities. And even if you somehow managed to make sure everyone except the authorities knew about the trustworthy pirates, that still wouldn't solve the problem because there are plenty of extremely server-dependent games that just straight up cannot be pirated. Piracy just isn't a reliable solution to the ownership problem, so stop bringing it up. Instead, point out what Sony absolutely does not want people to notice. That The Witcher 3 did legendary numbers on PC with absolutely no anti-piracy measures protecting it. So there's no good reason for Sony not to let you take your external hard drive full of digital PS5 games over to your friend's house so she can play your copy of Spider-Man 2 on her offline PS5. But we can't all just switch over to GOG. They don't sell my favorite game. PCs are really expensive. Windows is getting worse and worse, and no one has time to learn Linux. Look, the point of my tirade isn't to convert you to Goglinism, alright? I don't have a foolproof plan to win our game ownership back. But I do know what the first step is. The first step is to make sure everyone knows that what we really want is independent ownership of our digital games, and that there's no good reason we shouldn't get it. So the next time this topic comes up, don't whine about physical media dying, and don't chest thump about piracy. That's what they want us to do because it makes us look like cave dwellers and thieves, and cave dwellers and thieves are really easy to argue against. What they don't want to argue against are legitimate paying customers who know they're getting a raw deal. So whenever this topic comes up, flood the net with demands for the right to play our digital backups independently, and bully Sony with the story of GOG's enduring success. Editor J here. Please don't bully any of the people who work at Sony. Most of them probably have nothing to do with what's going on, so make sure you deliver all your toilet swirlies and locker incarcerations to the corporation as a whole, and not to any of its employees. Make it impossible for anyone to be unaware that there is now no honest reason that Sony or Microsoft or anyone else should stop us from independently playing our backed up digital libraries after The Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk 2077 sold over 35 million copies on PC with no anti-piracy measures protecting them. The big consoles are terrified of that fact, so we have to rub their faces in it like a dog in their own What's their problem?